I stood in my kitchen, rolling out pie dough the way my mother taught me 60 years ago. My hands moved in the familiar rhythm, working butter into flour until it resembled coarse sand, adding just enough ice water to bring it together. I'd made this same pumpkin pie recipe for every Thanksgiving since Thomas and I bought this house in 1978. The marble rolling pin I used was worn smooth in the center from decades of holiday preparations. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and I was getting a head start on the baking. That's when my phone rang. It was my son, Michael. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mom, he said, his voice carrying that forced cheerfulness I'd come to recognize over the years. About Thursday, Amanda and I were thinking it might be too much for you this year. I paused, the rolling pin suspended mid-stroke. Too much for me? You know, all the noise, the kids running around. Plus, Amanda's parents are coming and her sister with the twins. It'll be chaotic. He cleared his throat. We thought maybe we could bring you a plate on Friday instead. You'd probably be more comfortable at home anyway. What Michael didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had quietly purchased the mortgage on the colonial house he was so proud of, the one he could barely afford. He had no idea that the bank he made payments to every month was now sending those checks directly to his 72-year-old mother. The mother he had just uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner. The kitchen was filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and cloves from the pumpkin puree I'd already prepared. Outside, the November wind rustled through the maple tree Thomas and I had planted the year Michael was born. Its leaves had turned a brilliant red before falling, leaving the branches bare against the gray sky. Much like my own life, once vibrant and full, now stripped back to its essentials. Thomas had been gone for 5 years. Cancer took him quickly, barely 3 months from diagnosis to the end. We'd been married for 43 years, raised 2 children in this old Victorian house, and planned a retirement that never fully materialized. Now it was just me and the creaking floors, the photographs on the mantel, and the gentle tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Our daughter Elizabeth lived 3 states away. She called every Sunday like clockwork, but her life was busy with her medical practice and 3 teenagers. I saw her family twice a year, once in summer when they visited for a week, and at Christmas when I flew out to stay with them. Michael, on the other hand, lived just 20 minutes away in the upscale neighborhood he'd stretched his finances thin to afford. I set the rolling pin down and wiped my hands on my apron, leaving ghostly white handprints on the fabric. It was the apron Elizabeth had given me years ago, embroidered with "World's Best Grandma" in looping blue thread that had faded from countless washings. I see, I said, keeping my voice neutral. And what about the children? Will they miss their grandmother at Thanksgiving? There was a slight pause. They'll understand, Mom. Kayla has that dance recital coming up anyway, and Jason is always glued to his video games. It's just easier this way. Easier. The word hung in the air between us. Easier for whom? Not for me, certainly. Not for my grandchildren, who I'd baked cookies with just last month, who had laughed and hugged me tightly when I showed them how to make paper snowflakes the way their father used to when he was their age. Well, if that's what you think is best, I finally said. Great, thanks for understanding. Amanda appreciates it too. You know how stressed she gets with big gatherings. After we hung up, I stood in the silent kitchen, the half-rolled pie crust forgotten on the counter. I walked to the small desk in the corner where I kept my household files. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a manila folder labeled Investment. Properties. Inside was the documentation from Evergreen Mortgage Services, the small private lending company I'd established after Thomas died. With Thomas's life insurance and our modest savings, I'd had enough capital to make a few strategic investments. When Michael mentioned he was refinancing their house 3 months ago, complaining about the high interest rates, I saw an opportunity. Through Evergreen, which was essentially just me, working with a financial advisor and a lawyer, I purchased his mortgage from the bank, becoming, in effect, his lender. Michael made his payments to Evergreen, never suspecting that the company was actually me. It wasn't about the money. It was about security, about having some connection to my sons, life that couldn't be severed by a casual phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. I returned to my pie crust, pressing it firmly into the dish, crimping the edges with practiced fingers. Outside, Mrs. Patterson from next door was walking her corgi past my house. She waved, and I waved back. She was a widow too, 10 years younger than me. We sometimes had coffee together on Wednesday mornings. As I worked, I thought about the dinner I had planned. The turkey I'd ordered from Miller's butcher shop, small, just 5 pounds, but enough for a few meals and maybe a sandwich. Or two. The fresh cranberries in the refrigerator, the sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts, all for a Thanksgiving dinner I would now eat alone. I slid the empty pie crust into the oven to blind bake, setting the timer for 15 minutes. The rhythms of cooking had always soothed me, even in the hardest times. After Thomas's diagnosis, during those long, quiet months after the funeral, when the house seemed too big and too empty all at once. My mind drifted to last Thanksgiving, when I'd hosted everyone here. The house had been full of voices and laughter. Michael had carved the turkey with his father's old carving set. Amanda had complimented my gravy, asking for the recipe yet again, though I suspected she never actually used it. Kayla had played the piano after dinner. She wasn't very good yet, but her face had been so serious, so concentrated, that it brought tears to my eyes. The timer dinged, pulling me back to the present. I removed the pie crust, its edges golden brown, and set it on the cooling rack. I would still make this pie, I decided, and the turkey, and all the sides. I would set my table with the good china and the silver candlesticks Thomas and I had received as a wedding gift. I would celebrate Thanksgiving in my home, even if I celebrated it alone. And then, when December's mortgage payment came due, I would make a decision about what to do next. I opened the refrigerator and took out the bowl of pumpkin filling. As I poured it into the cooled crust, I thought about the expression my mother used to use. Living well is the best revenge. Maybe she was right. Or maybe there was another way to help Michael understand that his mother wasn't quite as obsolete as he seemed to think. The pie went into the oven. I set the timer again and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The November afternoon was already growing dark, but my kitchen was warm and bright. I was still here, still capable, still the owner of this house, and unknown to him, the owner of my son's house too. Thanksgiving was coming, and I had decisions to make. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. It was a habit I couldn't seem to break, despite having no real reason to rise early anymore. Thomas had been an early riser, up at 5 for his shift at the manufacturing plant, where he'd worked as a floor manager for 37 years. Even after he retired, we still had our coffee together as the world outside turned from black to gray to golden. I pulled on my robe and slippers and made my way downstairs in the dim light. The house was quiet except for the subtle pops and creaks of the old radiators coming to life. I'd had the heating system updated 2 years ago, a significant expense, but I wanted to keep the original character of the house. Michael had questioned the decision. Why put all that money into this old place, he'd asked. Have you thought about selling? There are some nice retirement communities not far from us. I hadn't bothered explaining that this house wasn't just walls and a roof to me. It was every Christmas morning, every skinned knee bandaged at the kitchen table, every argument and reconciliation, every quiet evening with a book while Thomas worked on his crossword puzzles. Some things couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. As the coffee brewed, I checked my email on the tablet Elizabeth had insisted I learn to use. There was a message from Evergreen Financial Services, my company. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The automatic system notifying me that all November mortgage payments had been processed, including Michael's. I sipped my coffee and opened the folder I kept in my kitchen desk. Inside was the invitation I'd been working on for the past 2 weeks, an invitation to a family Christmas gathering at my house. I'd planned to hand them out at Thanksgiving. Now, I wasn't sure if I should bother. The phone rang, startling me. It was early for calls, barely 6:30 a.m. "Hello?" I answered, a slight edge of concern in my voice. "Mom? It's Elizabeth." My daughter's voice was clear despite the distance between us. "Are you sitting down?" My heart skipped. "What's happened? Are the kids okay?" "Everyone's fine," she assured me quickly. "But I just got off the phone with Michael. He told me you're not coming for Thanksgiving, that you're not up to it this year." I tightened my grip on the mug. That's not quite how the conversation went. "I figured as much," Elizabeth said, her voice tight with anger. "He said they were worried about you managing with all the chaos, that it would be too much for you." "And you don't agree?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Mom, you hiked through Yellowstone with us last summer. You volunteer at the library twice a week. You managed Dad's entire illness without asking for help once. The idea that a family dinner would overwhelm you is ridiculous." I felt a rush of gratitude for my daughter's clear-sightedness. Elizabeth had always been the more perceptive of my children, more attuned to the emotional currents running beneath the surface of our family. "Michael means well," I said, the habitual defense of my son coming automatically. Even as I said it, I wondered if it was still true. Had he always been this dismissive of me and I'd simply made excuses for him? "No, Mom," Elizabeth said firmly. "He's being selfish. Amanda's never liked hosting, and they're probably using you as an excuse. I called to tell you I've changed my plans. The kids and I are coming to you for Thanksgiving." "But you've already bought plane tickets to your in-laws," I protested. "They're refundable. Mark will still go see his parents. He needs to help his dad with some projects anyway. But the kids and I are coming to you. I'm booking our flights today." My eyes burned with unexpected tears. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. And honestly, so do the kids." When I told them there was a chance we'd have Thanksgiving at Grandma's instead, Emma actually cheered. "She's been talking about your apple pie since last Christmas." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Elizabeth's call had shifted something in me. The hurt was still there, but alongside it was a new resolve, a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in months. I pulled out my address book and found the number for Sarah Jenkins, my friend from the community center where I volunteered. She answered on the third ring. "Margaret, what has you calling at this hour?" Her voice was warm, slightly raspy from the cigarettes she'd given up 10 years too late. "I have a favor to ask," I said. "Are you and David still going to your daughter's for Thanksgiving?" "We are." "Why? Would you have room for one more?" "An old friend of mine, Harold Peterson, his daughter canceled on him at the last minute. He's too proud to ask, but I hate to think of him spending the holiday alone." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Of course we have room. David's always saying we need more men at these gatherings to balance out all the female energy. Tell him he's more than welcome." I thanked her and hung up, then immediately dialed Harold's number. He answered almost immediately, as if he'd been sitting by the phone. Harold had moved to town 3 years ago after his wife passed. We'd met at a grief support group at the community center, and over time, we'd developed a friendship. We had coffee together sometimes. Occasionally took in a movie or a concert at the local community college. Nothing romantic. Neither of us was looking for that. But a comfortable companionship that eased the solitude. Margaret, he said, his deep voice lifting in a question. Everything all right? Everything's fine, I assured him. I'm calling with a Thanksgiving invitation. My friend Sarah Jenkins and her husband are having a gathering at their daughter's place. They'd love for you to join. There was a pause. That's very kind, but I don't want to impose on strangers. Sarah's hardly a stranger. You met her at my birthday lunch last year. And her husband David is a retired engineer, like you. You'll have plenty to talk about. Another pause. What about your family gathering? I thought you were hosting this year. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. There's been a change of plans. Michael thinks I'm too old and frail for the excitement, but Elizabeth and her children are coming. Instead? Too old and frail? Harold's voice carried a note of indignation. Has he seen you at the community garden? You outwork volunteers half your age. His loyalty made me smile. Well, perhaps he sees what he expects to see. And what about the mortgage situation? Harold asked quietly. He was the only person I'd confided in about my purchase of Michael's loan. He still doesn't know, I admitted. And I'm not sure when, or if, I'll tell him. After we hung up, I walked through the house, mentally preparing for Elizabeth's visit. The guest rooms would need fresh linens. I'd have to stock up on the cereal my grandchildren preferred. Small, ordinary tasks that suddenly felt significant, even joyful. In the living room, I paused in front of the old upright piano that had stood against the wall for decades. Elizabeth had learned to play on this instrument. Michael, too, though he'd given it up by high school. My fingers drifted over the keys, picking out the simple melody of an old lullaby I used to sing to both of them. For 5 years since Thomas's death, I'd been drifting, going through the motions of life without fully engaging with it. I realized now that I'd been waiting for my children to need me, to include me in their lives in a meaningful way, waiting for permission to still matter. But perhaps it was time to stop waiting and start deciding. What did I want my life to look like now? What choices could I make, not as Michael and Elizabeth's mother, but as Margaret Wilson, a woman with perhaps 20 good years ahead of her? The revelation about the mortgage could wait. For now, I had a Thanksgiving to prepare for, a daughter and grandchildren to welcome, and decisions of my own to make. The week before Thanksgiving unfolded with a newfound energy I hadn't felt in years. I cleaned the guest rooms, aired out the quilts my mother had made, and pulled the good china from the upper cabinets. Each plate, rimmed with delicate blue flowers, carried memories of holidays past. Thomas at the head of the table, carving the turkey with exaggerated ceremony to make the children laugh. Elizabeth called daily with updates. Her flight would arrive Wednesday afternoon. Emma had a school project about family traditions she wanted to work on with me. 16-year-old James was bringing his guitar and wanted to know if the piano was still in tune. It is, I assured her. I had Mr. Abernathy from the music store come by last month. You didn't mention that, Elizabeth said, surprise evident in her voice. I hadn't told her because it had seemed like such a small thing at the time. But now I realized it was more significant. A quiet act of faith that music would return to my house someday. On Monday morning, I drove to the bank, not the large national chain where I did my regular banking, but the small local credit union where I'd established Evergreen Mortgage Services. Marion Chen, the manager who had helped me set everything up, greeted me with a warm smile. Mrs. Wilson, lovely to see you. What can I help you with today? We sat in her small office, a space made cozy with plants and family photos. I placed my folder on the desk between us. I'd like to make some changes to the Evergreen account, I said, specifically regarding the Wilson property on 478 Oakwood Lane. Marion nodded, pulling up the information on her computer. Your son's mortgage. Everything's current. He's never missed a payment. Yes, he's always been responsible that way, I said. There was pride in that, despite everything. I want to adjust the terms. For the next hour, we went through options, calculations, paperwork. When we finished, Marion looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Wilson? It's quite a significant change." I nodded, signing the final document with a steady hand. "I'm sure. Sometimes family requires difficult decisions." As I left the bank, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying seemed to lift. The decision was made. There would be consequences, certainly, but also clarity. No more half measures, no more silent resentments. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home, filling my cart with ingredients for Thanksgiving dinner. As I debated between fresh or frozen pearl onions for the creamed onion casserole Elizabeth loved, I heard someone call my name. "Margaret? Is that you?" I turned to see Amanda, my daughter-in-law, standing there with a nearly empty cart. She looked surprised and something else, uncomfortable. "Hello, Amanda," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "Thanksgiving shopping?" She nodded, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Just picking up a few last-minute things. Michael's mother was going to make the pies, but she came down with a cold, so it looks like it's on me now." I didn't miss the implications of Michael's mother, rather than my mother-in-law, a subtle linguistic distancing she'd adopted in recent years. "I'm sorry to hear she's unwell," I said. "Pumpkin pie?" "And pecan," Amanda sighed. "I don't suppose you'd share your recipe?" "Michael always talks about your pecan pie." For a moment I considered it. Perhaps this was an olive branch, a small opening. But then I remembered the dismissive phone call, the casual exclusion. "I'm afraid I'll be busy with my own Thanksgiving preparations," I said. "Elizabeth and the children are flying in tomorrow." Amanda's eyebrows rose slightly. "Elizabeth? I thought they were going to Mark's parents." "There was a change of plans," I said simply. A flicker of something, guilt, concern, crossed her face. "That's nice. I'm sure you'll enjoy having them." "Yes," I agreed. "Family is so important, especially during the holidays." We parted with polite goodbyes, and I continued my shopping, selecting the ingredients with care. As I loaded the groceries into my car, I spotted Amanda on her phone in the parking lot, gesturing animatedly. Calling Michael, no doubt. At home, I unpacked the groceries and began preparing what could be made ahead. The cranberry sauce, bright and tart, bubbling on the stove. The dough for the dinner rolls, kneaded by hand the way my grandmother had taught me, set to rise in a covered bowl on the counter. The phone rang as I was washing the mixing bowl. It was Michael. "Mom," he began, his voice carrying that forced casualness again. "I just talked to Amanda. She said she ran into you at the store." "Yes, we had a nice chat," I said, drying my hands on a kitchen towel. "She mentioned Elizabeth is coming for Thanksgiving?" "She is. With Emma and James. They arrive tomorrow." There was a pause. "I thought they were going to Mark's parents." "Plans change," I said, echoing my response to Amanda. "Elizabeth wanted to spend Thanksgiving with me." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less confident, almost hesitant. "Mom, about our call last week, I hope you didn't misunderstand. We weren't trying to exclude you. We just thought it might be easier for you to have a quiet day." I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself against the counter. "Is that why you didn't invite me? For my benefit?" "Well, yes," he said, but his voice had that slight uplift at the end, the one he'd had since childhood when he wasn't being entirely truthful. "I appreciate your concern," I said, "but I'm quite capable of making those decisions for myself." "Of course you are," he backtracked quickly. "Look, why don't you reconsider? We have plenty of room. The kids would love to see you." Part of me, the mother part that had spent decades smoothing over hurt feelings and family tensions, wanted to accept, to pretend the earlier conversation hadn't happened. But another part, the part that had signed those papers at the bank, that morning, held firm. "I'm afraid that won't work," I said. "I've already promised Elizabeth a traditional Thanksgiving here. But thank you for the invitation." After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, running my finger along the edge of the placemat. The hurt was still there, but it was changing shape, becoming something more defined, more purposeful. In the study, I opened my desk drawer and took out an old photo album. Thomas and I on our wedding day, Michael's birth announcement, Elizabeth's first piano recital, family vacations at the lake house we'd rented each summer, the tangible evidence of a life built around love and connection. Near the back was a photo I particularly treasured. Thomas and me standing in front of this house the day we bought it. We looked so young, so full of hope and plans. He had his arm around my waist, and I was holding the keys, grinning like I'd won a prize. In a way, I had. This house had sheltered us through every season of our lives together. It had been our greatest investment, not just financially, but emotionally. A stable center in a changing world. Michael had never quite understood that. To him, houses were primarily assets, things to be leveraged, upgraded, traded up for something better. His colonial on Oakwood Lane, with its perfect landscaping and modern kitchen, was as much a status symbol as a home. I closed the album and returned it to the drawer. Then I took out a fresh sheet of stationery, the cream-colored paper with my monogram that Elizabeth gave me last Christmas, and began to write. The words came easily, flowing from my pen with certainty. When I finished, I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote Michael on the front. I would give it to him after Thanksgiving, once I'd had time with Elizabeth and the grandchildren. Once I'd gathered my strength for what would come next. That evening, I called Harold to confirm his Thanksgiving plans with Sarah and her family. "All set," he assured me. Sarah even called to ask about my food preferences. Very thoughtful of her. "She's a good friend," I said. "I hope you'll enjoy yourself." "I'm sure I will, though I'd rather be spending the day with you," he said, his voice warm. "You'll see me Friday," I reminded him. "Elizabeth wants to meet you." After we hung up, I went upstairs to finish preparing the guest rooms. In Emma's room, I placed a small basket of art supplies on the desk, colored pencils, markers, a new sketchbook. She'd always loved drawing. In James's room, I left a book about jazz musicians I thought he might enjoy, given his interest in music. Small gifts, small gestures of welcome. The kinds of things grandmothers do when they're expecting beloved grandchildren. As I smoothed the quilt on Emma's bed, I thought about Michael's children, Kayla and Jason. They wouldn't be spending Thanksgiving with their grandmother this year. It saddened me, but I understood that some lessons come at a cost. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold firm to your own truth, even when it creates temporary distance. The mortgage papers sat in my desk downstairs, the terms now irrevocably changed. There was no going back, only forward into whatever came next. Wednesday arrived crisp and bright. I spent the morning preparing the turkey, glancing occasionally at the clock, counting down to Elizabeth's arrival. At 2:00, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to Emma launching herself into my arms. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, her 12-year-old limbs all energy and momentum. Behind her stood Elizabeth, looking tired but happy, and James, now taller than his mother, managing the luggage, with teenage stoicism. "Let your grandmother breathe, Em," Elizabeth laughed, stepping forward to embrace me. They tumbled into the house, bringing chaos with them. Bags in the hallway, coats on the banister, Emma's running commentary on their flight. My quiet home was suddenly wonderfully alive. "Something smells amazing," Elizabeth said, following me into the kitchen. "Cornbread stuffing," I confirmed. "And cranberry sauce is made, pie crusts ready to fill." "Mom, you've been busy?" she marveled, surveying the packed refrigerator. You didn't have to do all this yourself. I wanted to, I said simply. It's been too long since I cooked for family. Emma discovered the cookie jar. Snickerdoodles. You remembered they're my favorite. James appeared in the doorway. Grandma, is the Wi-Fi password still the same? It is. Your mother set it up last time. He nodded and disappeared, no doubt to establish his digital lifeline. Some things about teenagers hadn't changed since Michael and Elizabeth were young. As they settled in, I observed them with a mixture of familiarity and discovery. These were people I knew intimately, yet they surprised me constantly. James's newfound interest in jazz, Emma's detailed knowledge of marine biology, Elizabeth's deepened confidence. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. We finished food preparations together, laughing over Elizabeth's attempts to recreate my pie crust technique. James retreated upstairs with his guitar, music drifting down softly. Emma set the dining room table with serious concentration. This fork right, Grandma? She asked, holding up a salad fork. Perfect, I assured her. Your great-grandmother gave us that silver when your grandfather and I got married. Her eyes widened. That makes it really old, I laughed. Yes, I suppose, it does. By evening, we had fallen into rhythm, a new configuration of our family that felt both novel and right. We ordered pizza, continuing the tradition from when Elizabeth was a child of having a simple meal the night before Thanksgiving. As we ate, Elizabeth asked, "Have you heard from Michael?" "He called Monday after Amanda saw me shopping," I said. "He invited me to join them after all." Elizabeth's expression darkened. "A little late, don't you think?" "Mom," James interjected, "Aunt Amanda always seems kind of fake to me." "James," Elizabeth warned, "that's not appropriate." "It's okay," I said. "We're family here. And yes, Amanda can be difficult to read." "Why didn't Uncle Michael want you at Thanksgiving?" Emma asked bluntly. "Doesn't he like you anymore?" The question hung in the air, painfully direct. "I think," I said carefully, "that sometimes grown-ups make decisions that hurt others without meaning to." Elizabeth squeezed my hand. "Their loss is our gain." After dinner, James surprised us by offering to play some songs he'd been working on. His guitar music filled the house, tentative at first, then confident. "He practices for hours every day," Elizabeth whispered. "His teacher says he has real talent." When James finished, Emma insisted it was my turn at the piano. I protested, but found myself moving to the bench. My fingers found the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne, Thomas's favorite. The music returned, more easily than expected, muscle memory overcoming years of disuse. When I finished, all three watched me with surprise. "Grandma," Emma said, "that was beautiful. You should play more often," Elizabeth suggested. "Perhaps I will," I replied, meaning it. That night, after the children went to bed, Elizabeth and I sat in the kitchen with tea. The house had settled into a fullness rather than emptiness. "Thank you for coming," I said. "It means more than you know." "I'm sorry about Michael," she replied. "I was so angry when I called him." "What did he say?" "Made excuses. Said Amanda had planned a certain kind of gathering, that they worried about your comfort." She shook her head. "But I think they just didn't want to make the effort." I nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that. How easy it is to push people aside when they become inconvenient." "You're never inconvenient, Mom." "That's kind, but we all become inconvenient eventually. The question is whether love is strong enough to overcome it." We talked late into the night about family and obligation, aging and independence. I finally explained the mortgage situation in detail. "So you actually own their house?" Elizabeth asked, eyes wide. "In a manner of speaking. I hold the mortgage through Evergreen." "And Michael has no idea?" "None. The bank handled it as a routine sale of debt." Does that make you his landlord, essentially? Not exactly, but it does give me certain options. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. What kind of options? Legal ones, I said simply. But let's not worry about that tonight. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I want to focus on what we have, not what's missing. Later, lying in bed, I listened to the unfamiliar sounds of a house with people in it. Floorboards creaking, James's soft guitar, notes, the refrigerator humming downstairs. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home in my own house. Not just existing within its walls, but living there, present and connected. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and cold. I woke early and made my way downstairs to the waiting kitchen. Turkey prepped, pies ready to bake, vegetables waiting to be chopped. You're up early, Elizabeth said, appearing in her pajamas. I thought I'd be first down. Old habits, I replied, pouring her coffee. I used to get up at 5 with your father, even on holidays. We worked together in companionable silence, preparing the turkey, chopping vegetables. Elizabeth had always been methodical in the kitchen, unlike Michael, who approached cooking as an inconvenience. Mom, she said, dicing celery. I've been thinking about what you told me, about Michael's mortgage. Yes? Do you ever plan to tell him? I wasn't sure at first, I admitted. But now I think perhaps the truth needs to come out. Not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Elizabeth paused her knife. He'll be angry. Probably. But anger can sometimes clear the path to honesty. Emma burst into the kitchen, hair wild. Is it time to cook? Can I help? I assigned her the sweet potato casserole, forgiving enough for a child's experimental approach. James appeared soon after, sleepy-eyed but willing to peel potatoes. By mid-morning, the house filled with aromas of roasting turkey and simmering cranberries. 4 pairs of hands worked in imperfect harmony, reminiscent of Thanksgivings past. The doorbell rang. Elizabeth answered, returning with a large floral arrangement, autumn colors in a ceramic cornucopia. Delivery, she announced. There's a card. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom, I read aloud. Wishing we could be together. Love, Michael, Amanda, Kayla, and Jason. A peace offering, delivered by proxy. I felt mixed emotions, appreciation for the gesture, disappointment at its impersonality. That's nice, Elizabeth said, her tone suggesting otherwise. It is nice, I corrected gently. It means they're thinking of us. Emma examined the arrangement critically. The flowers are pretty, but it's weird they sent them instead of coming over. We returned to cooking, but something had shifted. Michael's flowers had made his absence more palpable. I excused myself to dress for dinner, a burgundy dress I'd bought last year but never worn, Thomas's anniversary gift necklace, a touch of perfume. The woman in the mirror seemed different from the one who'd answered Michael's call last week. More present, more certain. At 1 o'clock, we gathered around the table. The good china gleamed in candlelight. The turkey waited for Thomas's carving set, which James, as eldest male, would use today. I raised my glass of sparkling cider. To family, those present and those absent. To memories that sustain us and new memories we're creating today. To family, they echoed. As we began passing dishes, the phone rang. I answered, expecting Harold. Mom? Michael's voice. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Michael. The flowers are lovely. Good, good, he said. Background noise of a gathering behind him. Are you having a nice day? Very nice. Elizabeth and the children are here. We're just sitting down to dinner. Oh, he sounded surprised. Well, I won't keep you. I just wanted to call and check in. That's thoughtful of you. Maybe we can get together this weekend, he suggested, if you're not too busy with Elizabeth. Perhaps. I'll call you tomorrow. I returned to the dining room where curious faces awaited. Uncle Michael? Emma guessed. I nodded. Calling to wish us happy Thanksgiving. Elizabeth's expression was skeptical. Right before we eat? Quick call. Obligation fulfilled. Mom, James said reproachfully. She sighed. Sorry, it just bothers me. I know, I said. But today isn't about what's missing. It's about what we have. The meal was everything Thanksgiving should be. Abundant, flavorful, filled with conversation and laughter. James carved with exaggerated ceremony, mimicking his grandfather's serious expression. Emma shared middle school adventures. Elizabeth discussed her medical practice. Looking at their faces, lit by candlelight and animation, I felt a fullness beyond the excellent meal. This, I thought, is what family should be: present, engaged, connected by more than obligation. Around 7. The doorbell rang again. James went to answer. Grandma, he called. It's Uncle Michael and his family. Elizabeth stiffened. You've got to be kidding. Be kind, I whispered. For the children's sake. Michael entered looking uncomfortable, Amanda behind him holding a bakery box, Kayla and Jason trailing with their phones. We thought we'd stop by, Michael said with forced casualness. Since we were in the neighborhood. Their house was 20 minutes away in the opposite direction. How lovely, I said, rising. We've just finished our pie, but I'm sure we could find room for more. After awkward greetings and coffee in the dining room, Michael set down his cup deliberately. Mom, he began seriously, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. About your living situation. Elizabeth went very still beside me. My living situation? I echoed. Yes. He glanced at Amanda, who nodded encouragingly. We think it might be time for you to consider alternatives. Alternatives. There's a nice retirement community near us, Sunset Meadows. Independent living apartments, but assistance if needed. Beautiful grounds, activities, people your age. I felt Elizabeth's hand on my arm. Support or restraint, I wasn't sure. I see. And what prompted this suggestion? Michael shifted uncomfortably. Well, this house is so big for one person, and older needs maintenance. The stairs could become a problem as you get older. And, Amanda added enthusiastically, they allow small pets if you wanted a cat for company. The room grew quiet, as if the air itself were holding its breath. I appreciate your concern, I said finally. But I'm quite content where I am. Mom. Michael leaned forward, his voice patronizing. We're just thinking about your future. Your security. As am I replied steadily. Which is why I've made certain arrangements to ensure my independence for years to come. Arrangements? What kind of arrangements? I glanced at Elizabeth, who nodded slightly. Financial ones, among others. But this isn't the time to discuss them. We have guests, and it's a holiday. The tension was palpable. Amanda looked confused, Michael frustrated, Elizabeth grimly satisfied. After they left, the visit lasting less than an hour, Elizabeth helped me load the dishwasher in silence. You didn't tell him, she said finally. No, not yet. When? I faced her. Soon, very soon. That night, alone in the living room, I contemplated the visit, the forced casualness, the barely hidden agenda. It wasn't just about Thanksgiving, I realized. It wasn't even about me being too old for family gatherings. It was about this house, this valuable piece of real estate in a desirable neighborhood. About what would happen to my assets when I could no longer live independently. Michael wasn't heartless. He was practical, forward-thinking, but he had miscalculated. He had looked at his aging mother and seen someone diminished, someone whose needs could be managed, whose life could be reorganized for convenience. He had failed to see me at all. Outside, light snow had begun to fall, the first of the season. I watched the flakes drift past the window, each unique, each temporary. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would tell him the truth about the mortgage. Not out of anger, but because truth, even difficult truth, was the only foundation for whatever relationship we might salvage. Friday morning brought pale sunlight and the quiet aftermath of holiday celebrations. Elizabeth and the children were still asleep, exhausted from yesterday's festivities and the emotional undercurrents that had run beneath them. I dressed with particular care, a tailored navy pantsuit I'd bought for Thomas's funeral, but hadn't worn since, a simple strand of pearls, low-heeled shoes that were both comfortable and dignified, armor of a sort, though I hadn't thought of it that way until I caught my reflection in the mirror. Downstairs, I made coffee and called Michael. The conversation was brief. "Could you come by this morning? There's something I need to discuss with you." "Is everything all right?" he asked, concern edging his voice. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Just some business matters we should talk about." "Business matters?" He sounded confused. "What kind of business matters?" "It would be better to discuss it in person. Could you come at 10? Alone, please." There was a pause. "Alone? Mom, what's this about?" 10 o'clock, Michael," I repeated gently. "I'll see you then." I hung up before he could ask more questions. Then I took the mortgage documents from the envelope I'd placed on my nightstand and spread them on the dining room table. The legal language was dense, the implications of the revised terms significant. I'd had my lawyer explain everything in detail before signing, understanding exactly what I was doing and why. At precisely 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on the porch, his expression a mixture of concern and wariness. "Mom," he said, stepping inside. "What's going on? You sounded strange on the phone." "Let's sit in the dining room," I suggested, leading him through the house. "Would you like coffee?" "No, I'm fine." He glanced around. "Where's Elizabeth and the kids?" "Still asleep. They had a long day yesterday." In the dining room, the documents waited on the polished surface of the table. I took my seat at the head, where Thomas had always sat during family dinners, and gestured for Michael to sit at my right. "What are these?" he asked, eyeing the papers. "Mortgage documents," I said. "For your house on Oakwood Lane." He frowned. "My mortgage documents? Why do you have those?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what came next. "Because I own your mortgage, Michael." He stared at me, incomprehension giving way to disbelief. "What are you talking about?" 3. Months ago, when you mentioned refinancing, I established a private lending company called Evergreen Mortgage Services. Through Evergreen, I purchased your mortgage from First National Bank. That's not possible," he stammered. "It's not only possible, it's done," I said, sliding the paperwork toward him. "These documents confirm it. The mortgage payments you've been sending to Evergreen have been coming to me." Michael scanned the papers, his face paling. "Why would you do this? Were you spying on me? On my finances?" "No," I said calmly. "It was an investment decision. A way to ensure I maintained a connection to my family's well-being." He looked up, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "This can't be legal." "It's completely legal. Mortgages are bought and sold by financial institutions every day. The only unusual aspect is that the purchasing institution happens to be owned by your mother." Michael pushed the papers away, his movements sharp with anger. "So what now? You're my landlord? Are you planning to raise my payments? Evict me if I miss one?" The accusation stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "That was never my intention." "Then what was your intention?" he demanded. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, had loved without condition for 45 years, and saw how completely he had misunderstood me, not just today, but for years. "My intention," I said carefully, was to maintain some meaningful connection to your life. A connection you seemed increasingly unwilling to give freely. His anger seemed to falter slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about being pushed aside, Michael. About being uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner because I'm too old. About being seen as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be included. That's not fair, he protested. We were just concerned about you. Were you? Or were you concerned about this house? I gestured to the room around us. About what would happen to my assets as I age. He flushed, the color high on his cheekbones. How can you think that? Because of your visit yesterday, I said. Your sudden interest in moving me to a retirement community. Your concern for my security that conveniently involves selling this house. Michael sat silent for a long moment, the weight of my words settling between us like a physical presence. Outside, a car drove slowly past the house, its tires crunching on the light dusting of snow from last night. This is insane, he finally said, his voice low. You've been planning this ambush for months. Not an ambush, I corrected. A reckoning. He pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. You can't just... Sit down, Michael. My voice was quiet but carried the authority I'd developed over decades of teaching kindergartners, then my own children, and later my grandchildren. It was the voice that said boundaries would be respected. Surprisingly, he sat. I haven't shown you the amended terms yet, I said, turning to the last page of the document. Amended terms? His voice held a note of apprehension. Yes. Earlier this week, I visited the bank and made some changes to the mortgage agreement. Fear flickered across his face. What kind of changes? Nothing punitive, I assured him. I've reduced your interest rate by 2 percentage points, effective immediately. I've also established a payment schedule that will have your mortgage fully paid off in 15 years instead of 25. He blinked, clearly not expecting this. You lowered my interest rate? Yes, the terms are more favorable than anything you could get elsewhere, especially in the current market. I don't understand, he said, confusion replacing some of the anger in his expression. If you're so upset with me, why would you do that? I looked at him steadily. Because you're my son. Because I love you, even when I don't like your actions. And because I want you to understand something important. What's that? He asked warily. That I am not a burden to be managed or a resource to be harvested. I am your mother. I am a person, with agency and dignity and the right to make my own decisions about my life. Michael flushed again, but said nothing. I don't need your permission to exist in my own way, I continued. I don't need your approval to live in my own home, to host holidays, to maintain relationships with my grandchildren. Mom, he began, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. These revised mortgage terms come with conditions. His wariness returned. What conditions? Relational ones, I said. I expect to be included in family gatherings, not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as a valued member of the family. I expect to have regular, meaningful contact with my grandchildren. And I expect to be consulted, not managed, when it comes to decisions that affect my life. And if I don't agree to these conditions? He asked, a slight edge to his voice. Then nothing changes with the mortgage, I said simply. You keep making payments under the original terms. But our relationship remains exactly as it is now, distant, formal, and increasingly empty. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted our conversation. A moment later, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day. Everything okay in here? She asked, glancing between us with concern. Fine, I said. Michael and I are having an important discussion. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll keep the kids upstairs for a while. Take your time. After she withdrew, Michael sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the documents before him. I waited, allowing him the space to process everything I'd said. "I never meant to push you aside," he finally said, his voice subdued. "It wasn't a deliberate thing." "I believe that," I replied. "But intention and impact are different things. The effect was the same, regardless of what you meant or didn't mean." He nodded slowly. "Amanda and we did talk about the possibility of you selling this house. Not immediately, but eventually. It's worth a lot in the current market, and we thought—" "You thought the proceeds could help you financially," I finished for him. "Not just that," he protested. "We genuinely worry about you being alone here. About you falling or something, happening and no one knowing." "Those are valid concerns," I acknowledged, "but they should be part of an open conversation with me, not decisions made about me without my input." Another silence stretched between us, less tense than before but still heavy with unspoken thoughts. "The retirement community suggestion wasn't entirely about the house," Michael said finally. "Amanda's mother moved into Sunset Meadows last year. She loves it there, has made friends, joined clubs. Amanda thought you might be happier with more people around you. I considered this. That may be true for Amanda's mother. It's not true for me. At least, not yet. Perhaps someday I'll want or need that kind of arrangement. But right now, I'm content where I am." "Even alone?" "I'm not alone," I corrected gently. "I have friends. I volunteer. I have Elizabeth and her family, even if they're not physically close. And I have you and your family. Or I should have." Michael looked down at his hands. "I don't know what to say about all this. The mortgage thing, it feels manipulative." "It was desperate," I admitted. "A mother trying to maintain some connection to her son's life. Perhaps not my finest moment, but an honest one." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for what felt like the first time in years. "What do you want from me, Mom? Really?" "I want what most parents want," I said. "To remain a part of your life. To be seen as myself, not as a category or a problem. To love and be loved in return. And the mortgage?" "The mortgage is security," I said. "For both of us. You get better terms, a faster path to owning your home outright. I get the assurance that if our relationship falters again, I still have some tangible connection to your life." He shook his head slightly. "That sounds so transactional." "All relationships involve transactions of a sort," I pointed out. "Exchanges of time, attention, care. The problems begin when the exchanges become unbalanced, when one person gives and the other only takes." Michael seemed about to respond when the sounds of laughter drifted down from upstairs. Emma and James, probably enjoying some private joke or game. The sound hung in the air between us, a reminder of what family should sound like. "I need time to think about all this," Michael said finally. "To talk to Amanda." "Of course," I agreed. "Take whatever time you need. The amended terms are there if you want them, but there's no deadline. This isn't an ultimatum. It's an invitation to rebuild something we've both let deteriorate." He stood, gathering the papers together with careful movements. "Can I take these to review?" "They're copies. The originals are with my lawyer." He nodded, tucking the documents into his jacket pocket. "I should go. Amanda's expecting me back." I walked him to the door, our steps measured and deliberate. At the threshold, he paused, turning to face me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I am sorry about Thanksgiving. It was wrong to exclude you." "Thank you," I said. "That means something." After he left, I stood in the hallway, listening to the familiar sounds of my house, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the distant voices of my grandchildren, the gentle hum of the furnace. I felt drained but calm, like the aftermath of a necessary storm. Elizabeth appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression questioning. I gave her a small nod. Not victory, not defeat, but acknowledgement of a crucial step taken. Whatever came next, I had spoken my truth. I had persevered through the painful silence and distance, through the dismissal and exclusion, to arrive at this moment of clarity. The mortgage had been a means, not an end, a bridge back to something essential that had been lost. Whether Michael chose to cross that bridge remained to be seen, but I had built it as solidly as I could, with love as much as with legal documents. For now, that would have to be enough. The weekend passed quietly. Elizabeth and the children stayed until Sunday afternoon, filling the house with activity. Board games in the living room, James practicing guitar on the back porch, Emma and Elizabeth baking cookies in the kitchen. We didn't discuss Michael or the mortgage situation further. It was a deliberate pause, a breathing space before whatever came next. After they left, amid promises to return for Christmas and regular video calls, the house felt emptier, but not empty. Something had shifted. In me, a quiet certainty that had been missing for years. Monday morning, I called Harold. "Would you like to have lunch today? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." We met at Riverside Cafe, a small restaurant overlooking the park where I often walked in good weather. Harold was already seated when I arrived, dressed in a tweed jacket that somehow made him look both distinguished and approachable. "You look well, Margaret," he said, rising slightly as I took my seat. "The family visit agreed with you." "It did," I agreed, though not without complications. Over soup and sandwiches, I told him about the confrontation with Michael, the revelation about the mortgage, and the uncertain state in which we'd left things. "And now?" Harold asked. "What's your next move?" "I'm not sure there is one," I admitted. "The ball is in his court." Harold considered this, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Have you thought about what happens if he simply continues making payments under the original terms? If he chooses distance over reconciliation?" The question bothered me, though I'd asked it of myself more than once over the weekend. "Then I'll have to accept that. I can't force a relationship he doesn't want." But I'd like to be prepared, to have a plan for moving forward either way." Harold nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I might have a suggestion if you're open to it." His idea was simple, yet profound. A family trust that would include both Michael and Elizabeth, structured to provide for my needs while eventually transferring assets, including Michael's mortgage, to my children and grandchildren. He knew an excellent estate attorney who specialized in complex family situations. "This isn't about control," Harold emphasized. "It's about clarity. Clear boundaries, clear intentions, clear consequences, both positive and negative." I found myself nodding. Transparency as a strategy. Exactly. No more hidden maneuvers, no more guessing games. Everything in the open, with professional guidance. By the time we finished lunch, I had a plan. Not a weapon or a shield, but a framework for moving forward regardless of Michael's response. That evening, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Michael?" "Mom." His voice sounded different, subdued, perhaps even humble. "Amanda and I have been talking about the mortgage, about Thanksgiving, about everything." I waited, giving him space to continue. "We'd like to come over tomorrow evening if that's all right, to talk." "Of course," I said. "I'll make dinner." "No, don't go to any trouble. This isn't a social visit. We need to figure some things out. Together." After we hung up, I sat in Thomas's old armchair, watching darkness settle over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on. Windows across the way glowed warm with evening activities. Lives unfolding in their separate but connected ways. Tomorrow would bring either breakthrough or breaking point. Either way, I was prepared. I had my home, my dignity, my truth, and a strategic path forward that didn't depend on anyone else's choices. For the first time in years, I felt not just resigned to my circumstances, but actively engaged in shaping them. Tuesday evening arrived, with a light drizzle that turned the fallen leaves slick and darkened the early dusk. I spent the day in measured preparation, not cooking an elaborate meal as I might once have done, but making my home and myself ready for whatever conversation lay ahead. At 6 o'clock precisely, the doorbell rang. Michael and Amanda stood on the porch, both dressed as if for a business meeting rather than a family visit. I noted the absence of the children. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Can I take your coats?" They followed me to the living room, where I'd set out coffee and the butter cookies Thomas had always preferred over fancier desserts. Small comforts for what promised to be an uncomfortable conversation. Michael sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, Amanda beside him, her posture equally tense. Neither reached for coffee or cookies. "Thank you for seeing us," Michael began, his voice formal. "We've been discussing the situation extensively." "I'm glad to hear it," I said, taking my seat in Thomas's chair. Michael placed a folder on the coffee table, the mortgage documents I'd given him, plus what appeared to be additional papers. "We consulted with our financial advisor," he said, "and our attorney." I nodded, unsurprised. "That seems prudent." "They confirmed what you said. You do in fact own our mortgage through this evergreen company." His tone held lingering disbelief. "It's unusual but completely legal." "Yes," I agreed simply. Amanda leaned forward slightly. "What we don't understand is why. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just talk to us if you were feeling—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Excluded?" "Would you have listened?" I asked gently. "Really listened?" Michael flushed. "That's not fair. We've always—" "Always what? Called on holidays? Visited occasionally? Invited me to events? When it was convenient?" I kept my voice calm despite the words. "That's not the same as listening, Michael. That's not the same as seeing me." A silence fell between us, heavy with years of unacknowledged distance. "We've made a decision," Michael said finally, straightening his shoulders. "We want to accept the amended mortgage terms." I studied his face, looking for signs of the boy I'd raised, the son I'd loved without reservation for decades, and the conditions that come with them. "Yes." He met my gaze directly. "All of them." Amanda nodded in agreement, though I noted the slight tightness around her mouth. "We understand now," Michael continued, "that we've been thoughtless. Not just about Thanksgiving, but about a lot of things. We took you for granted, assumed you'd always be there when it suited us, without considering what you might need or want." The words sounded rehearsed but sincere. I wondered how many conversations they'd had over the past few days, how many realizations had come painfully into focus. "And the retirement community suggestion?" I pressed. Amanda spoke up, her voice softer than usual. "That was mostly my idea. My mother really is happy at Sunset Meadows. I thought—" She trailed off, then tried again. "I assumed what worked for her would work for you. I didn't consider that you might have different needs, different attachments, different values," I added quietly. "Yes," she acknowledged. "Different values." Michael reached for my hand, a gesture so unexpected that I almost pulled back. "Mom, I want you to know that this isn't just about the mortgage. Yes, the better terms would help us financially. But we've realized we've been missing something more important, a real relationship with you, with the children's grandmother, with my mother." Tears pricked behind my eyes, but I held them back. This moment required clarity, not emotion. "I appreciate that, Michael. I truly do. But I need you to understand something important." "What's that?" "I didn't do this to punish you or to control you. I did it because I needed to be seen, not as a convenience or an inconvenience, but as a person with my own life, my own dignity, my own place in this family." He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. Good, I said. Because going forward, that's what I expect. Not just holiday invitations or obligatory phone calls, but real presence, real respect. We can do that, Amanda said. And for the first time, I believed she meant it. I reached for the folder on the table, adding a document I'd prepared that morning after speaking with Harold's attorney friend. Then I think we have an agreement, I said. The amended mortgage terms will take effect next month. And this, I tapped the new document, outlines my plans for eventually transferring the mortgage to a family trust that will benefit both you and Elizabeth, and ultimately all 4 grandchildren. Michael looked startled. A trust? You've already planned that far ahead? I have, I confirmed. Because whether you realized it or not, I've never stopped thinking about your future, about our family's future. Even when you forgot to think about mine. The confrontation I'd anticipated, angry words, accusations, perhaps even threats, never materialized. Instead, we sat in my living room as the rain tapped against the windows, 3 adults navigating the complex territory between autonomy and connection, between past hurts and possible reconciliation. Not enemies, not quite allies yet, but family in all its complicated, imperfect reality. And for now, that was enough. December arrived with gentle snow, transforming the neighborhood into a holiday postcard. 3 weeks had passed since my conversation with Michael and Amanda. 3 weeks of small, cautious steps toward rebuilding. The first sign of change came when Michael called on a Friday evening. Mom, Kayla has a piano recital Sunday. Nothing fancy, just at her teacher's home. We thought you might like to come. I accepted. Of course. Kayla played a simplified Carol of the Bells, her small fingers careful on the keys. Afterward, she looked at me with an uncertain smile. Was that okay, Grandma? Did I play it right? It was beautiful, I assured her. You have a natural feel. For the music. The following week brought a text message from Amanda, the first she'd ever sent directly. A simple invitation to Sunday dinner, no special occasion. The dinner wasn't perfect. Jason remained glued to his phone until Michael intervened. Amanda seemed slightly nervous, but it was a beginning, awkward, tentative, but real. I brought photo albums, sharing stories about Michael's childhood that made Kayla giggle and even Jason smile. Amanda asked questions about Thomas, listening with what appeared to be genuine interest. You never told us how you and Dad met, Michael said, surprise in his voice. You never asked, I replied, without accusation. Small moments, building slowly. Michael calling for advice about Kayla's school. Amanda stopping by with fresh-baked bread, just because. The children sending occasional text messages. I watched. With cautious optimism, neither expecting perfection nor accepting mere tokens. When old patterns emerged, Michael canceling a visit last minute, Amanda making a dismissive comment about seniors, I addressed them directly but gently. I understand work obligations, I told Michael, but next time, let's reschedule immediately. I know you didn't mean anything by that comment, I said to Amanda, but it reinforces stereotypes that don't reflect my reality. They listened, not perfectly, not without occasional defensiveness, but they listened. Meanwhile, my friendship with Harold deepened. We attended concerts, volunteered together at the library, shared meals and conversations. You seem different, he observed one evening as we walked through the park. More present. I feel more present, I agreed. More engaged with my own life, not just as an appendage to my children's lives. The mortgage situation helped with that. It was more the decision to stop accepting what wasn't working, to stop pretending occasional phone calls and obligatory visits were enough. Elizabeth called weekly, but our conversations had new depth. I shared more of my thoughts, my occasional struggles. She responded in kind, allowing me to be not just a supportive mother, but a genuine confidant. One snowy afternoon, Michael's car pulled into my driveway unexpectedly. He emerged carrying a small Christmas tree in a pot. "I thought you might like this," he said. "It's a Norfolk pine. You can plant it in the garden come spring, or keep it as a houseplant." The gesture, thoughtful, personal, connected to my love of gardening, moved me deeply. We placed it by the living room window and sat together, drinking tea and talking about nothing in particular, comfortable in a way we hadn't been in years. Not because I owned his mortgage, not because I'd forced a confrontation, but because we'd both, finally, done the work of seeing each other clearly. Christmas Eve arrived with picture-perfect snow and crystal-clear skies. For the first time in years, my house was prepared for a full family gathering. Ornaments Thomas and I had collected, children's handmade decorations, white lights outlining the windows. Elizabeth and her family occupied the guest rooms. Michael, Amanda, and their children would join us for dinner and return Christmas morning for gifts and brunch. As I arranged the dining table with Thomas's grandmother's lace tablecloth, I felt a profound contentment. "Mom, this looks amazing," Elizabeth said. "Need any help?" "Everything's ready," I assured her, "just waiting for the others." The doorbell rang at 5 o'clock. Michael held a poinsettia, Amanda carried a casserole, and the children clutched wrapped packages. "Merry Christmas," Michael said, kissing my cheek, a gesture that had become natural again over recent weeks. Once everyone had settled with drinks, Michael cleared his throat. "Before dinner, Amanda and I have something to share." The room quieted. Even Jason looked up from his phone. "We've been thinking since Thanksgiving," Michael continued, "about family, priorities, the future. We've decided to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" Elizabeth asked cautiously. "Good ones, I hope," Michael replied. "I've cut back my hours at work, turned down the Singapore project that would have meant traveling most of next year." This was news. Michael had pursued that project for months, seeing it as his path to partnership. "That's significant," I said carefully. "It is," he agreed. "But the cost was too high. I looked at where I was heading. 70-hour weeks, missing Kayla's recitals, barely knowing what classes Jason takes, and I didn't like what I saw." "We're also selling the house," Amanda added. "We found a smaller place closer to the children's school, with a yard they'll actually use. The payments will be half what we make now." I observed them. Michael's relaxed shoulders, Amanda's genuine warmth, noting how these decisions seemed to have strengthened rather than strained their relationship. "We have one more announcement," Michael said, turning to me. "We'd like to start a new tradition. Sunday dinner at your house every week. The whole family, no excuses except genuine emergencies." "Every week?" I repeated, disbelieving. "Every week," Amanda confirmed. "We've already blocked it in our calendars as non-negotiable." Something caught in my throat. Not quite tears, but close. "I think that sounds wonderful," Elizabeth said. "We can join virtually until we're in town. And when we move closer, if the Chicago job works out, we'll be there in person more often," Mark added. Later, as we gathered for the traditional reading of A Visit from St. Nicholas, I stood slightly apart, taking in the scene. James played piano softly. Emma and Kayla examined ornaments together. Jason, surprisingly, had put away his phone to help arrange stockings. Michael approached with 2 cups of tea, offering one to me. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For the tea? For not giving up on me. On us." He paused, choosing words carefully. "When I first learned about the mortgage, I was angry. I thought you were manipulating me." I nodded, acknowledging this. "It wasn't my finest approach." "But it worked," he conceded. "It made me stop and really look at what was happening between us." We sipped our tea in companionable silence. "I never told you this," Michael said finally. "But after Dad died, I was scared of losing you too. So I created distance, made you a holiday obligation, a Sunday phone call. It was easier than integrating you into our lives as you were, not as you had been. His honesty touched me deeply. And now? Now I understand relationships evolve but don't have to diminish. I'm not perfect, Mom. I'll still mess up sometimes. But I'm trying, really trying. That's all any of us can do, I replied. Try, adjust, try again. Amanda called him for a family photo. He squeezed my arm before moving away. Coming! Mom, you too! I joined them, taking my place at the center. Elizabeth set the timer and hurried to join us. Just before the flash, I felt Michael's hand on my shoulder, a small gesture speaking volumes. The photo captured not perfect harmony, but a family genuinely attempting to see each other, to make space for each other's realities. A new beginning built on honest acknowledgement of old wounds. Spring arrived with gentle persistence, the front yard alive with color, daffodils nodding, tulips standing tall, the cherry tree I'd planted last fall showing its first delicate blossoms. 6. Months had passed since that pivotal Thanksgiving when Michael said I was too old to join their celebration. 6 months of gradual, imperfect, but meaningful change. The Sunday dinner tradition had taken root, becoming our family cornerstone. Each week, my kitchen filled with voices and laughter. Elizabeth and her family joined virtually most weeks, with their move to Chicago confirmed for summer. Michael had followed through on his promises. He worked fewer hours, attended Kayla's recitals and Jason's games, and seemed more present not just with his children but with himself. They'd moved to a smaller home that better suited their evolving priorities. Amanda and I had developed a genuine relationship independent of Michael. She'd asked me to teach her my pie crust recipe, a request unimaginable 6 months earlier. I'd joined her garden club, finding unexpected common ground in our love of perennials. The mortgage arrangement continued in the background, payments going to Evergreen with full transparency, our family trust established for the future. Today was special. April 15th, Thomas's birthday. In previous years, I'd marked it quietly, perhaps visiting the cemetery. This year, the whole family gathered for a remembrance that felt like celebration as much as mourning. Harold arrived first with a potted rosebush, a new variety called Faithful Heart, with deep crimson blooms. We planted it together where morning sun would warm its branches. Give it time, he said, standing back, and it'll be magnificent. As the house filled with family, I retreated briefly to my bedroom, holding Thomas's old blue sweater, the one he'd worn on weekend mornings. 5 years later, his scent was gone, but my memory supplied it anyway. Downstairs, Michael was showing the children old photos, narrating stories about their grandfather, fishing trips, the treehouse he'd built, his determination to master sourdough, bread in retirement. "Grandma," Emma called from the tablet screen, "tell us how you and Grandpa met, the real story." For the next hour, we shared Thomas' stories, some familiar, some I'd never heard. Elizabeth recounted how he'd taught her to change a tire in pouring rain. Michael remembered his patient explanations of math concepts. "He never raised his voice," Michael said wonderingly. "Even when I was being completely obtuse. He saved. That for me," I joked, earning knowing laughter. Before our meal, lasagna, Thomas's favorite, Michael raised his glass. "To Dad, who taught us how to be a family, even if we sometimes forgot the lessons." After we ate, Michael handed me a small box wrapped in blue paper. "We found this in Dad's things. It was for your 75th birthday. We thought today was right to give it to you." Inside was a silver locket containing our wedding photo on one side and a recent picture on the other. Both of us gray-haired but smiling with the comfortable joy of long partnership. "There was a card, too," Michael said. In Thomas's handwriting was a message that brought immediate tears. "My dearest Margaret, by the time you read this, I'll have been gone for a while. But know that my love transcends time and space. You were the heart of our family, the quiet strength that held us together. Never doubt your importance, your wisdom, or your right to claim your place in the world we built together. All my love, always, Thomas. I passed the card to Michael, who read it silently, then looked up with bright eyes. He knew you, Michael said softly. Really knew you? Yes, I agreed, finding my voice. He did. Later, on the back porch with Harold, I watched the garden in fading light. The new rosebush stood among established plants, not yet blooming but full of promise. I never told them about Thomas's card, I said, about what he wrote regarding my place in the family. Some wisdom has to be earned firsthand, Harold replied. They had to find their own way to that understanding. Inside came the sounds of family, dishes being rinsed, leftovers packed away, children helping in their haphazard way. Normal sounds I'd once feared were lost to me. The mortgage that once seemed so important was now just a detail in our story. What mattered was the journey, from exclusion to inclusion, from being forgotten to being seen. 6 months ago, my son said I was too old for Thanksgiving. He didn't know I owned their mortgage, but the true revelation wasn't financial power. It was discovering that at 72, I still had the strength to stand up for my place in the family, to demand the respect and inclusion I deserved, and, in doing so, I had helped us all remember what family truly means. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.